Hello, viewers, and welcome to another exciting show of Inspirational Journeys. Thank you so much for watching. Life's a journey. We owe it to ourselves to discover who we really are and to fight for what we believe is necessary for our happiness. The challenges and difficulties that we face in life will test our character and our ability to prosper. Insecurity can grow in our hearts and leave us in uncertainty. Yet, we see often an unexplainable fire in some human beings that allows them to defeat all odds and achieve victory. Tonight, we get a chance to meet and talk with Dr. Philip Guzman, a prominent psychologist graduated in clinical psychology from Buffalo State University. He shares his thoughts on challenge, failure, and overcoming adversity by thinking out of the box, by being creative in transforming challenge into success. How he's proving his theory? By walking the road himself. I'm honored to present his inspirational journey. Hello, Dr. Philip. Thank you so much for having you here. Thank you for coming. Doctor, you were born in Puerto Rico, and you came to the States early when you were just a few months old.
Correct. Yeah.
What prompted you coming to the States?
Well, my family came from Quebradillas, Puerto Rico, and they were farmers in sugarcane. But my older brother, Charlie, had broken his Achilles heel, and they needed to do some operations on it. So for that reason, we moved up to New York to get him the operations he needed. Unfortunately, some of it didn't work, but he's walking with two legs, but one of his legs are not working well. But that's the reason why we came.
Okay, and how was your childhood?
Well, I basically was bicultural in many ways. I mean, we came and we lived in Brooklyn, New York, in a community predominantly white English speaking, and we were probably one of few, if any, Latino families. So at home, Spanish was our language and our culture, and in the streets, in school, it was English. So we had to kind of be bifurcated, two different ways of dealing with that. But I was young enough that I was able to, didn't see the difference. Okay. I thought this was the norm for me.
Did you attend public school?
No, we went to parochial school because when my parents came, they met someone and said, oh, they go to the parochial school and it's a good school, and we went there, we started that. I went to Queen of All Saints School in Brooklyn. Okay,
and it was there that you graduated from high school?
No, I did that 8 years in parochial school, but then I went to St. John's Prep, which was a parochial high school. But my journey in schools was kind of not smooth, so to speak. And we talk about failures and conflicts or obstacles that come along. And I can remember vividly, I was in the third grade, that I was studying for finals, and I decided to close my books and not study, and said, God won't let me fail. And guess what? I failed. And that traumatic event for me was kind of an eye-opener, because it was rather traumatic. And so even though I failed in third grade, by the time I got to the 8th grade, I was in the top of the classes, in good grades. It made me then go to parochial high schools. However, I had difficulty getting into a parochial high school. Because they had standardized testing, and I was not that great at standardized testing. I was good academically. I got honors, but I got into... So with the help of my father, I went to the school that my brother was attending, St. John's Prep, which is a 4-year high school, and did that. But it was through my father's intervention in getting me into that school. From there, I decided to go into the seminary. I wanted to become a priest.
That's what I heard.
Yes. And I spent a total of about 5 years.
Oh, that's a long time.
Long time. I went to Princeton University, New Jersey, for my seminary. minor seminary, and spent 3 years there. And then I came to my novitiate, which was in Richfield, Connecticut, for a year. The novitiate was a spiritual year off, like you just think about religious issues. And then I went to the major seminary in Northampton, Pennsylvania for about a year, but decided this was not for me.
It wasn't.
It was not.
And was it there and then that you decided that psychology was a career that you wanted to embark in?
No, when I left, I didn't know what I was going to do. All I knew, I didn't want to become a priest. And I went, and a counselor said to me, well, what did you want to major in? And I said, didn't know. He mentioned psychology, and I said, that sounds interesting. So I did that. And I took the courses, and I liked it.
Okay, so by pure luck.
By pure luck, and just, I got it, and I enjoyed it. And I said, let me go into graduate school.
Okay.
And I thought, that would be a piece of cake. I was doing well, and graduated magna cum laude from college, and I said, let me go into graduate school, and I couldn't get in. And I just didn't get accepted to any of the schools. And that was kind of a blow, because here I was, a good student, academically well, I couldn't get in. And that made me think,
what's wrong?
What's wrong? What am I going to do with this failure, and how do I deal with it? And so I said, okay, what I'll do is, I got my bachelor's, let me go to Puerto Rico. I went to Puerto Rico, worked for a year, and applied again to graduate school. But this time, I said, let me put a little security there.
Okay.
So I said, let me apply for a master's level program in addition at St. John's.
While being in Puerto Rico?
While being in Puerto Rico. You apply about maybe couple of 6 months before you want to go in, so they look at the applications and they give you a chance to review who you are. So I did get in. I didn't get into any of the graduate doctoral programs, but I did get into the master's program. So I graduated the master's. While I was doing my master's, I said, let me apply again, see what I can do. I didn't get in again, and then I started to work at Manhattan State School, which is in dealing with the mentally disabled. And at that time, Geraldo Rivera had done a big thing on TV exposing the kind of the lack of care that was happening in Willowbrook State School. And I was a psychologist, so I would go and evaluate the individuals to bring them out of the state schools and back into the community. Okay.
Very interesting.
Yeah, and it was enjoyable. But then I wanted to go back, and I applied again. But this time to apply, I said, I have to do something different. I can't repeat my same errors. I have to do something different.
You have to make changes in order to have a different outcome.
And when I apply to schools, you think about, well, you're going to talk about why you like psychology, why I should be in this field, why I want to counsel people. But this time I said, no, I have to take a political perspective to this. And what I did was, I said in my application, there are not many Latinos in psychology, period. There are very few. Politically, as universities, you have a responsibility to encourage more Latinos.
And diversity. So do you feel that being a Latino was one of the reasons why you were being not accepted on the schools?
No, I don't think it was, being Latino was in some ways I would have hoped that it was an edge, but I found it neither. It had no bearing, because the schools had a lot of applicants. They didn't need Latinos, So I had to justify that. And one of the other things I did, there was a city and state representative, Herman Badillo. He was the Bronx president of the Bronx board, and he became the first Latino to go into Congress. And so I had the guts enough to write him a letter. And I said to him, you have a responsibility to help other Latinos coming behind you. And I really would encourage you to help me get into graduate school. I did get a little offer from his office saying, where do you want the letters of recommendation? And then in addition to that, Ford Foundation was looking for, they had some scholarships for Latinos. It was new. So with his letter going to that, I got a Ford Foundation fellowship, which paid my tuition and gave me a stipend. And then every school I applied to wanted me.
So you were able to carve your way in.
Yes.
And that takes me to what you were saying, thinking out of the box when you are in front of a difficulty. How can you maneuver things in ways that are probably not the typical?
Exactly.
So what would you say about that?
Well, that's, I think, what happens to do when you have some failures or setbacks. So you have to not repeat what you normally would have done. You have to think about different ways of approaching it so that you can overcome it. And that's what I learned from that. I say there are different ways of getting around the barriers that are there. So if I'm the only Latino, now I want to increase the number of Latinos. If I can't get into school, what do I do? How do I get into those things and open it up the doors? And that's what I think I accomplished somewhat with going into the Buffalo State University. I was able to get into that place. I liked it, and I learned a lot about psychology. I got my internship in Austin State Hospital in Austin, Texas, which gave me another perspective of culture in the country. But I found that being a psychologist enabled me to think of change. That's what I want to do. I want to help people change their lives,
their behaviors,
and improve. And also, so I became a psychologist in Clifford Beer's clinic. That was my first job in New Haven, Connecticut. And I did a lot of community work in addition to therapy. And the only reason I got that position is because United Way funded a position for a Latino therapist. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have gotten a job.
So what would you say in your experience and your journey were the pillars that made you have that strong will attitude towards overcoming those challenges?
Well, it goes back to that failure in third grade, and that was a devastating thing, and how I get over that. So I learned to think ahead, anticipate what would be coming, and then try to
prepare.
So I can prepare and do it, and that's what helped me. So when I felt like I could be a change agent. That's what I liked about psychology and clinical psychology. You're trying to make changes, and the changes in the individual and the family were great. But I found changes in a community even more challenging and greater. So when you're the CEO of an agency, you can make an impact a whole lot. When I was the CEO of Guzman Mental Health, which was the only Latino agency in Massachusetts, because Springfield got a grant to do that, and I was able to increase the services in that community, and thereby making changes in that community for the mental health.
And I was going to ask you, did the community embrace your changes?
Yeah, I think the Latino community embraced it. There's a lot of politics always in how you do it, because sometimes you have some individuals who've been fighting the fight in the community, Latinos, and
for a very long time.
And they resent some new person coming in
with new ideas and wanting to make changes.
And then, and then you have the other people on the other side who you're making these changes, and so, but you always encounter that, and I think the idea is it's where you improve the community. Have you left something behind? And that's what I felt like with Gandara. I left a lot of services for the Latino community there, so I was very proud of that. I then, after that, decided, well, what about changes at the national level? Maybe I could do something there. And then a position opened at the American Psychological Association in D.C. And I said, let me take a gander at that. Maybe I could do something to increase the ethnic minorities in psychology. But that was a bureaucratic kind of organization. It's very large and bureaucratic, and it was somewhat difficult, and it takes a long time to make changes in the bureaucratic system.
And you were talking earlier, we were talking about how the foundation is, how the structure typically is, which is like a pyramid.
Yes.
And, the boss is on the top, and it gives all the guidelines to the employees, and then the employees do as the boss wants. And you were talking of changing that mindset and how it helped you improve your community and the work that you were doing.
Most organizational structures are like a pyramid, where the boss is on the top giving orders to the people underneath and what to do. And what I decided to do with Gandara, when the first agency, is to turn it upside down. I had all these staff underneath me who could help me make changes in the community. But if I didn't empower them and didn't give them the support they needed to make changes, then what I was doing was going to be minimal. So by having them doing the work and making changes, my impact was greater.
Sure.
And I helped a lot of people move up the ladder, and that was my job, is to support them.
Mm-hmm. And talking about it from an individual standpoint, if we're talking about failure and challenges that we face on an individual level, if we see the change in the foundation as to a way to get to a new place, it does help us.
Exactly.
So what would you say, or what would be your advice for anyone experiencing a difficulty, how their mindset, or how can they go about changing their mindset to make changes to their lives? Yeah,
I think, failures, as depressing as they may be, as sad as they may be, and that's there, that you're not going to change that. It's what do you do after that? What do you do with that failure? Is the measure of who you are and what you can do. Mm-hmm. And if you take that failure and to build something and redirect yourself, and change, then you improve as a result of that original failure. So my road, my path in life never was straight, never was, smooth. It was turn left, turn right, there's a hole here, there's a ditch there, there's a mountain up. But it enhances me on it, and so I like that. I think that's a good thing to do. People can't wallow in the fact that they have lost something or they didn't get something. It's how do you fight back and how do you get up and start doing it again, but differently, not the same way. You have to think about different approaches to some things.
And how can you build a sense of changing what you've done so far? How do you go about changing your mindset?
Well, I think changing mindset is a difficult thing. That's what therapy is many ways is about. It's how do you help someone change their mindset and doing things, because we all get into that rut somehow.
And habits and things that we've done forever.
Right.
And we don't see ourselves doing it any differently.
Exactly. And that's why sometimes an outsider coming in and helping you put perspective on things. That's the beauty of therapy, is that outsider is objective and says, is this really the right path, what you did before, and helps you, guide you through the ways to really improve yourself. And that's what I think the beauty, that's what I like about psychology and therapy.
And as a professional, what would you say were the greatest challenges that you faced?
The greatest challenge, I think, one is always advocating for the Latino population, which they necessarily weren't the voting population. They didn't, so to make changes at state level, to make changes at the city level, really it's a political issue.
Yeah, because we're talking in the 80s.
Yes.
In the 70s, the 80s, where the Latino population was not used to voting or having any impact on society.
Exactly. And I think that's now you're seeing a change in those things, and they are coming together, and the much more educated Latinos in the community, and they're really getting their foothold into the politics of any issue, even with an organizational issue, and getting some position in which they can make some positive changes for the community.
Sure. So that was your greatest challenge, you say?
I did.
Working with the population, the Latino population?
And when I was a child guidance, it was not a Latino agency, and I had to change the perspective, foundation of the agency to diversify every aspect of it, to make sure that there was African Americans and Latinos in all sectors of the organization. So what happens is people see the similarities as an individual, and they are attracted to that. And that's what made my organization really good, because we had African Americans, we had Latinos, we spoke Spanish. From the moment the person came on the phone or came into the clinic, there was someone
so they would feel they belong.
Exactly.
And that's very important. Very important. There was something that I read in one of the articles that was written about you, and you mentioned that helping your child gain inner self-control, he will thus be able to endure sharp experiences. And that, I found it very interesting, because as a mother, I struggle also on a daily basis, with your child when he goes through a difficult situation. You know that he must go through it, because that's
Sure.
just going to help him, get better and understand how life is. But what I found that was very interesting is helping our children that inner self-control, which is knowing how to deal with your emotions, the emotions of sadness, of frustration. So what can you tell us about
Well, I think
that?
sometimes some kids, not just yours, I had mine too, they transition even from the earlier schools to middle school, and middle school to high school. Those transitions are somewhat hard on kids because they're going in with a different group, they're at different age ranges, sometimes they're accepted, not accepted. So it's really able to talk to your child to see what's going on, and kids are a little bit reluctant to talk. So you have to kind of put the energy in there to really talk about things, and sometimes lead them, not ask what's happening, but does this happen? Because usually when kids transition from the elementary school to the junior high, there's a transition going on, and you say that to them because that's normal. And you say that's okay. So when you say that's okay, then kids may be able to talk more about how they feel. They don't have my friends, I don't have this one, or they're in different classrooms. Then that helps them to adjust a little bit more. But the transitions are difficult.
And when you were working in Bridgeport with the clinic, what were the difficulties that you find that kids had the most?
We ran the gamut of, from kids being abused and neglected to kids who just couldn't adjust to schools and were failing, and kids who really had serious emotional issues. So we really ran the gamut from really kids who were psychotic to kids who just had issues of behavior. But I find the behavioral issues to be the worst, and I think also how that the child within an inner city manages living in a community that's afraid to be out in the streets and there's dangers. They go to schools. There are different environments that this child has to maneuver that we don't, as parents, sometimes appreciate and realize, and that is to talk with
has an influence on them.
And so it's most of the stuff was really a behavioral problem issue that kids were having in school and acting out their frustrations were most of the problems we got at the clinic.
And as an individual, where do you get your strength to deal with these situations? Because it must be hard from a personal standpoint to see these journeys happen in front of you and having or not having influence to change them. So how do you find, where is Philip as a human being, where you're at to be able to help others?
Well, obviously my family. My wife is an anchor. She gives me reality checks every once in a while, so I know that. The kids have also been very good and helpful in getting reality things. I think that the benefit I get sometimes looking back and reflecting is, did I help someone else move forward? And to me, that was always the benefit of being a psychologist. As a client, you want to move forward. As a boss, you want your staff to move forward. And I've helped a number of people go from, they were secretaries in the clinic to now paraprofessionals. They went back to school, educate. And to me, I felt very good that the agency and I were moving them forward. To me, that progress is kind of what makes me feel good.
Is there anything that you would have done differently?
What I would have done differently? I don't think I could change anything, but I wish I didn't.
Or something you didn't do.
I wish I didn't feel that third grade. I wish I studied, but no. But I think no. I think I'm content with my life. I feel like I did it. I helped people along the way, and I helped communities that I worked in. So I feel a little bit satisfied. And could I have done better? Maybe. I don't know. But I feel content with myself and what I tried to do and achieve, and as an agent of change.
Okay. And what would you say is your biggest legacy?
Legacy. Oh, wow. I don't know. I guess I changed some things. I mean, in some things not even in psychology or in mental health. I remember I sat on the Judicial Nominating Committee for Massachusetts, selecting judges. and it came to a female, Latina, who was up, and the committee said no to her. And I said, no, she wasn't going to go. And I raised my hand, I said, wait a minute, hold up. We just approved a gentleman who had the same number of years of experience as she did. And you approved him for judgeship, but not her. And they all stopped and they looked at her, you're right. And she got her judgeship.
Oh.
So to me, that was a thing. It had nothing to do with psychology, but it was an impact.
Yes.
And I said, this is the stuff that I think we all have an opportunity by raising our hands and saying something that we could change some direction.
And I think sometimes we fear to do that.
Yes.
I think we are programmed to just listen and process and follow the instructions and the guidelines. And when life throws you things in different ways and you have to take a different road, it is hard because, as you said at the beginning, we're programmed from what our parents, taught us, from our culture, our set of values, and changing that sometimes is so hard.
It is.
To get what we need.
But when you can effect some change, that you should remember those things, because those are great things. To me, it's like making the change. A change agent is a mantra of mine. So.
Yes, and as you're retired now. Okay, and how do you feel now from how you felt when you were, working? Do you feel now that you can have still an impact in your family and friends?
Well,
as you did, are you extending your mentorship to them?
Well, I don't know. It's a good question. I feel like I'm content in being home and retired. I think the politics and the procedural stuff, funding and Congress, and, it's hard. It's difficult, and so it's a nice pause not to have that responsibility.
Okay.
At the same token, I am focused more on my family and looking at my sons and now my grandkids, and the extended family too, and thinking, well, what I want, the legacy I want to leave them is the family is the basis.
I was going to ask you that.
The development of everything for who you are, and to keep in touch. My both kids stay close to me, which they haven't moved. Thank goodness.
So for your grandchildren, what would you say is that you want them to remember you for?
Oh, be a funny guy.
And you are.
That's it. They're so young, I feel like I just want to have positive images and memories of me as they grow older, and they're... Some of them will have it, and some are too young yet. But that's good. I think my sons hopefully will pass that on to them.
Yes. And I don't want to end our interview without talking about something that is very important, and I know is important in our society right now. You said that back then, many years ago, people wanted to know only what is in their mind. But today, we want to look into the environment of the individual, the context in which these problems occur. And I know we talked about it earlier, but I want you to tell us more about how do you, what can you tell us about that? Because indeed, we do go into our mind when we're having, facing a situation.
Right.
We the first thing that we do is we go into ourselves and think that something wrong with me, and how can I change this? And we beat ourselves very hard. So
yeah, I think what happens, you can't focus just on the individual. You have to focus on the individual in a community, in a family setting, in a society, and by putting that person in that context, you're better off.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you so much for
My
being
pleasure.
here. It's been
My
a pleasure,
pleasure.
and I know you'll be back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.